My name is Hannah Grayson. I'm 41, and I'm the chief accountant for a freight company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've balanced ledgers so complex that a single misplaced digit could bring the whole system crashing down. But nothing prepared me for the way my 15-year marriage unraveled clean, calculated, and colder than I ever thought possible. I woke up from thyroid surgery to the sterile white glare of hospital lights. My throat burned. The heart monitor beeped in steady ticks like a metronome. I shifted slightly, pain stabbed through my neck. The anesthesia still lingered in my veins, turning my limbs to lead. All I wanted in that moment was a familiar voice. Jared, my husband. The man I'd called home for 15 years. I needed him beside me, holding my hand, grounding me from the fear crawling up my spine. The door creaked open. Jared stepped in, crisp white shirt, neatly combed hair. His eyes met mine, blank, emotionless. In his hand, a yellow manila envelope. I tried to sit up, but only a rasp came from my throat. He didn't come closer. Just placed the envelope on the table beside my bed. I thought, this would be a good time for you to read this, he said, voice calm and casual, like he was suggesting lunch. I glanced at the envelope. Nothing marked on the outside, but I already knew. I could feel the fracture coming. I reached for it, hands trembling, opened it. Divorce papers, signed, notarized, filed. Even a draft of asset division, concise, clinical, and cold as a quarterly tax report. I sank back into the pillow, silent, breathing. 15 years. I once believed that kind of time was a promise. Turns out, it's just long enough for someone to plan their exit without raising suspicion. You really chose now, I croaked, voice torn like old fabric. Jared didn't answer right away. Just looked at me like I was some obstacle on his path, not the woman who'd just come out of surgery. There's never a perfect time for this. But at least, you're lying down. He shrugged. I don't want to drag this out. I don't feel the same anymore. He didn't feel the same. That's what he says when I'm barely conscious, stitched and bandaged. I let out a silent laugh. The kind you make when screaming would break you apart. I turned down a lead audit position in Boston so he could chase his real estate dream here. I was the one who stayed by his father's side through 4 brutal months in hospice while he closed deals. I kept the books for his first company, free labor. 0 complaints. I thought loyalty earned you security in a marriage. But looking at those papers, I realized I'd been solving an equation the wrong way. He'd done the math. I was still trying to count love like a balance sheet. You're seeing someone, aren't you? I asked, though my gut already knew. He didn't reply. But the way he broke eye contact, it was a confession without words. Is it that girl from the gym? I pressed, letting each word drop like stone. A flicker of surprise, just enough to confirm it. Alyssa. I'd seen her in the morning yoga class, tanned skin, smiling eyes that never reached her soul. The one who once called me the perfect wife while waiting outside to pick Jared up. I turned my face away. I didn't want him to see the tears. Not because it mattered to him clearly. It didn't, because I still had some pride left. Did you take Rufus already? I asked, voice shaking. Rufus is fine. He's at home. Who's home? For the first time. He hesitated. I'll keep the house. For the prenup. The house. Dog. He nodded. In that moment, everything inside me fused into one sensation cold. Not the hospital air, but the kind that spreads from the marrow of betrayal.
I turned to face him. One last time. How long have you been planning this? It doesn't matter anymore. To you, maybe, but to me, that's where everything starts. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the hospital ceiling. Fluorescent light casting a dull glow like a projection screen where I watched the film of my life. Every choice. It's okay. Every time I put Jared's needs before my own. And one question dug into me like a hook behind the ribs. Why did he choose the moment I was weakest to be his cruelest? And then came another question, darker, quieter. What else has he been hiding behind my back?
3 weeks after Jared handed me the divorce papers in that hospital room, I stood outside the Mecklenburg County Courthouse, gripping the file folder my lawyer had just returned to me. March in Charlotte was still chilly. A soft drizzle clung to the few strands of hair growing back after hormone treatment. But I didn't feel the cold. I felt nothing. The battle ended quicker than I expected. Or maybe I was never meant to be a part of the battle in the first place. The prenup, the one I signed at 26. Back when I loved Jared, blind trust and youthful naivety, was deemed valid and fully enforceable by the court. It didn't matter that I'd managed the entire household budget, that my name was on the joint savings, or that I'd paid for his parents' care in their final years. Legally, the real assets, the house we lived in for 12 years, the brand new Tesla, the real estate investment firm weren't mine. The worst part, Rufus, our Australian shepherd. I'd raised him since he was 6 weeks old. I named him, fed him 3 meals a day, walked him every night. I was the one who rushed him to the vet when he broke his leg falling off the couch. Rufus is registered under his name, my lawyer said, eyes lowered. His name's on the vaccination records and the microchip. The court can't override that. I didn't cry. I just kept seeing Rufus's eyes through the car window as Jared drove him away. He was squirming, confused, staring back at me like he didn't understand what was happening. I chased them all the way to the curb. Jared hit the gas. Even my dog didn't get to stay with me. I moved into a rundown apartment in South End, a place that felt more like a college dorm than a home. The walls were stained with grayish blotches. The stove smelled damp, and every night, my neighbors screamed at each other through the paper-thin walls like echoes of my collapsing life.
Each morning, I woke on a lumpy twin mattress, covered with hand-me-down blankets, and opened a near-empty fridge, 1 carton of soy milk, and a frozen bag of vegetables. I turned on a rusted coffee maker and stared out the grimy window, whispering to myself today will be better. But how do you believe that when the word home now exists only on a divorce decree? The court awarded Jared the house in Mint Hill, the same one where I'd planted lavender around the white fence, the place where I lit candles each night and read books under soft golden light with Rufus curled beside me. Jared claimed the house was tied to business operations. The judge agreed. I tried to keep my wedding ring, the one passed down from my mother, a family heirloom. But Jared had it appraised at over $5,000 and insisted it qualified as a high-value asset subject to division. It would need to be sold and split. My mother died 7 years ago. I couldn't stop him from selling even her memory.
My lawyer, Emily, was young, kind, hardworking, but she lacked the firepower. Jared hired Graham and Myers, a top-tier law firm, flanked by 2 junior associates and a financial analyst. Emily looked like a baby deer thrown into shark-infested waters. "Are you sure he didn't plan all this way in advance?" she asked me as we walked out of the courtroom. I didn't answer. I just kept seeing Jared's face unmoved, cold, not once looking back. That night, I pulled my old suitcase from under the bed. Every item I pulled out was a memory from a life I no longer owned, a version of me who thought sacrifice was a duty, and kindness was enough to make someone stay. At the very bottom of the suitcase was a beat-up notebook. The cover was frayed, the corners sealed with aging tape. It was the one I used to track our household finances, 7 years of budgeting scribbled in pencil. Inside were everything bills, expenses, investments, and strange inconsistencies I'd once ignored. Like the times Jared withdrew thousands in cash from our joint account, no explanations, no receipts. I used to assume it was for business stuff, and I believed him because I trusted my husband. I spent the whole night flipping through pages, circling suspicious items, matching dates, transactions that didn't add up. Something didn't sit right. The next morning, with the sun barely creeping through the dusty window, I scribbled on a piece of paper, "You took the house. You took Rufus, but you will not take my memory." I didn't know if any of this could be used legally, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never again be the woman who trusted blindly. And if Jared thought I'd quietly disappear, he was about to realize just how badly he miscalculated the woman he once married. I first met Alyssa in a Saturday morning yoga class at a luxury studio near Dilworth. She was about 15 years younger than me. Her body sculpted like marble, always flashing that soft smile and calling me Miss Hannah. Once, after class, she even handed me a chilled towel and said, "I really admire you. You have such a calm, grounded energy." I smiled politely and felt warmed. What I didn't know was that she'd already been sleeping with my husband when she said that. One sleepless night in mid-April, I was mindlessly scrolling through TikTok when I stumbled upon a trending couple challenge, two people dancing in sync against a golden sunset. One of the faces in the video made my blood freeze. Jared, and next to him, Alyssa in skin-tight workout gear. Head tilted flirtatiously toward him, her eyes glowing, her hand resting on the very shirt I had bought him. The caption read, "Asheville Retreat, recharging with someone special." Someone special? I screamed. It was raw, jagged, primal. My throat, still healing from surgery, felt like it was splitting open all over again. I bolted to Facebook, then Instagram. No tags, but the same location, the same dates. And in one story, there it was, Rufus. His tail wagging wildly, lying between them, gnawing on a stick. Jared had taken my dog on a romantic getaway with his mistress. My hands trembled so violently I dropped the phone. My vision blurred, not from shock, but from a fury that was slow, deep, and ice-cold like fire under thick frost. I started combing through my memories. The nights Jared said he had late meetings with clients. The times he came home smelling like oils that weren't mine. There was a day I found a massage receipt labeled for I asked him about it. He said it was a gift for a business partner, and I believed him. Alyssa once invited me to brunch after yoga. We chatted about clean eating and how Jared should try intermittent fasting for gut health. She grinned, then winked. He really takes care of himself. Back then, I took it as small talk. Now I realized it was a warning, one of those covert declarations mistresses make when they're already settling into territory they haven't earned. I called Emily, my attorney. Can evidence of an affair reopen asset division? She paused, then gently said, "You know, North Carolina is a no-fault divorce state." Right. Infidelity doesn't affect asset division unless there's financial misconduct involved. I bit my lip. I didn't want Jared to pay just for breaking my heart. I wanted him to pay for legally making me the fool. A week later, I returned to the old gym, not to work out, just to observe. Alyssa stood at the front desk, black crop top and pale leggings. When she saw me, she smiled, same friendly warmth, like nothing had changed. I walked up. Hi, Miss Hannah. I didn't expect to see you here. Everything? Okay. I didn't respond. Just looked at her. Long enough for her to notice that the softness in my eyes was gone. You know, I said, voice calm. Rufus never sleeps well without his old blanket from home. Did you bring it with you? She flinched, blinked, then tried to maintain composure. Rufus is doing great. I just want him to have a stable environment. I nodded. Stable? Right. Like sleeping with someone's husband while they're recovering from surgery. Her cheeks flushed. Her eyes darted to the side. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to claw or scream. I needed clarity. And the clarity was, these people who betray you are rarely as clever as they think. That night, I pulled out the old finance notebook again. I cross-referenced the cash withdrawals with retreat dates, yoga sessions, spa invoices. I marked every suspicious transaction with red ink. And then it hit me. Jared hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He might have been using marital assets to fund his new life with Alyssa, which meant it wasn't just betrayal, it was financial fraud. I wrote one line in the margin of that notebook. If the law won't give me justice for heartbreak, I'll use it for the truth. No one teaches you how to start over at 41 after losing your home, your dog, and your faith in a system you once believed was called justice. Mornings in my crumbling South End apartment began with honking horns and ended with neighbors screaming over electric bills. I once the woman who managed million-dollar budgets now counted nickels at 7-Eleven to buy coffee. I didn't believe in that cliche about time healing all wounds. I didn't want to heal. I wanted answers. I wanted to know how Jared could be so cold, how Alyssa could smile at me, call me Miss Hannah, while sleeping with my husband behind my back. And most of all, I wanted to know how much Jared had buried behind those divorce papers. I enrolled in a night class at UNC Charlotte Family Law and Post-Divorce Financial Analysis. It was tailored for working adults. Most of the class were women with hollow eyes and fidgeting hands, carrying the same brand of quiet desperation I did. I barely spoke, just took notes, underlined, highlighted, studied like my life depended on it. By day, I got a job as an accountant at a growing fintech startup. It paid 30% less than my old role, and the position was far beneath my qualifications. I needed money. And more importantly, I needed to understand the system from the inside. I wanted to know exactly how it had been used against me. I kept to myself during lunch breaks, packed my meals, ate quickly, then opened my laptop and combed through civil court records of divorce cases across the state. One afternoon, a younger co-worker named Caitlin sat next to me in the pantry and peeked at the case file on my screen. Are you doing a PhD or something? I smiled faintly. No. I'm learning how to reclaim what I once thought was justice. At night, I sat on the floor, desk lamp casting yellow light over my old notebook. The red ink bled across the pages: home purchase, cash withdrawals, unclear transfers gradually forming a pattern. Jared had transferred a significant amount of money
into an LLC called Orion Ventures, a name I'd never heard during our entire marriage. I looked it up. Orion Ventures was a small real estate company, no website, no listed employees, but it owned multiple properties near Asheville, where Jared and Alyssa had gone on their little retreat. My pulse spiked, hands trembling. I clicked through the public records. Registered owner, A.R. Properties, LLC, Alyssa Rains. It was her. They'd used marital assets to build a separate investment network. This wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was the theft of a future I had helped build from scratch. I called an old friend, Marcus Tran, a forensic financial analyst I used to work with. Marcus was the kind of guy who drank black tea laced with whiskey and never asked questions if you just texted. I need you. We met at a quiet bar. I brought everything: bank statements, my notebook, the research I'd compiled. Marcus flipped through it all, then looked up at me. Did Jared actually think you'd never put this together? I used to believe him, I said. Now I want the system to know exactly what he did. You can reopen the case. If you can prove asset concealment and misappropriation of marital funds, the court can reinvestigate. But Hannah, this won't be easy. He has money, lawyers, connections. I tightened my grip on the table's edge. I don't need easy. I need right. A few days later, while checking emails at the office, Caitlin messaged me, "Hey, not sure if this is really you, but I saw this on TikTok. Is this about you?" I clicked the link. A video popped up from an account named HL Fitness Queen, Alyssa. In the video, she gushed about finding love with a man who'd survived a suffocating marriage. Romantic background music, Jared walking Rufus through the woods, and a caption that read, "Don't let past pain stop you from living your truth." I laughed. Not the bitter kind. The kind that comes when you know deep down they've just made a fatal mistake. They made me public. That night, I reopened the divorce case files, drafted an appeal. Marcus sent me a short list of top-tier attorneys specializing in post-divorce asset fraud. I chose one with a record of taking down Graham and Myers, Jared's firm. Her name was Rachel Levin, 53, black. A former prosecutor who once won an $8 million judgment against a multinational corporation. When we met, she didn't waste time. "I don't care about the romance," she said. "What I need to know is, do you want justice in ink or in blood?" I replied, "I'll take ink, but I want every line to make him bleed." When I stepped out of Rachel's office that late afternoon, light rain drizzled from a gray sky. I walked into it bareheaded, wind slapping my face, and for the first time in months, I felt warm on the inside. I wasn't the woman left behind after surgery anymore. Not the one who lost her dog, her house, or her dignity. I was Hannah Grayson. I knew the law. I knew the numbers. And I knew exactly how to make a man bleed through the very system he thought would protect him. A month after my first meeting with Rachel Levin, I was no longer the woman clinging to justice with bare hands. I had an attorney. I had a forensic financial analyst. And most importantly, I had the truth. Those long, lonely nights at the office had turned me into a hunter, chasing financial traces the way bloodhounds chase scent. What Jared and Alyssa thought they'd buried beneath layers of LLCs, silent transfers, and proxy holdings now sat neatly filed in a red folder labeled Orion Project. Rachel flipped through the dossier, her eyes flashing when she landed on the 2021 transaction when Jared quietly siphoned $92 $400 from our joint account.
funneled it into a shell company under a fake name, then laundered it through 2 real estate entities tied to Alyssa. Too perfect, Rachel said. Too arrogant. I didn't say a word, but inside, bitterness welled up, not because he fooled me, but because I had taught Jared these mechanisms. I was the one who explained how to reclassify investment costs. I was the one who showed him how to legitimize emergency funds for businesses. I had forged the blade. He had turned it on me. Rachel filed a motion to reopen our divorce settlement on grounds of newly discovered, undisclosed marital assets. She also petitioned the court for a temporary freeze on all properties and accounts associated with Jared and his linked businesses until the investigation concluded. The court agreed. I didn't know how quickly the news would reach Jared, but just 3 days later, I got an email from him. No subject, no greeting, just one sentence. What are you doing? Hannah, we could have ended this peacefully. Don't turn it into a war zone. I stared at the screen, then let out a quiet laugh. Not bitter. Just cold. I typed back one line. You made me a trophy. I'm just reclaiming my weapons. Soon after, I was called to testify in a preliminary hearing to determine whether Jared's assets would remain frozen. When I entered the courtroom, he was already seated, gray suit, muted tie, clean-shaven, as if prepping for LinkedIn headshot. Alyssa was nowhere to be seen, probably realizing this stage was no longer about love. I wore a simple black suit, hair pinned back, no jewelry except one piece my mother's wedding ring. The very one I'd repurchased at a private auction of Jared's personal assets 2 weeks prior. When his eyes landed on the ring, he flinched half a second. Just enough. Rachel presented with unwavering poise, her arguments reinforced by Marcus's forensic charts, transaction flows, time-stamped wire transfers, property deeds. The crescendo was a photo she slid onto the table, a snapshot of Jared and Alyssa outside the Asheville estate, taken just weeks after he drained funds from our marital account. Jared stood, ready to object. Rachel raised a hand. Come. Mr. Grayson, can you confirm is this property registered under Orion Ventures LLC, affiliated with our Properties LLC, and financially connected to you via 3 unreported transfers? He went quiet, swallowed. His lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously. Jared only looked down. He said nothing. 1 minute later, the judge rendered the decision. The court grants a temporary freeze on all assets linked to Jared Grayson and affiliated companies. This matter will proceed to an extended investigation into potential post-divorce financial fraud. That night, I returned to my apartment as light rain patted the window pane. I brewed myself a cup of peppermint tea and turned on the old jazz playlist I used to listen to during late-night budget reviews. Rufus wasn't there, but I still had his worn collar hanging beside my apartment keys, a small symbol of everything I'd lost. And a quiet reminder, memory thieves can't steal your soul. A week later, Alyssa posted something cryptic on Instagram, a photo of her alone at a dinner table with the caption, "When truth is twisted by the bitter-hearted." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. When the law speaks, I don't have to scream. But I started writing not another affidavit, but a story. A blog post on Medium under my real name, Post-Divorce Accounting, When Women Know Numbers. In just 3 days, it hit over 100,000 reads. In the comments, someone wrote, "Thank you for not staying silent. I thought I was the only one who lost everything and stood up from the wreckage." I didn't know who they were, but I knew then this wasn't just my story anymore. And Jared, He wasn't facing just one woman he underestimated. He was facing an army. That morning, Charlotte was draped in an unusual fog. A thin gray veil settled over the city's glass towers, making everything look like a stage awaiting its curtain call. And I, Hannah Grayson, was ready to step into the spotlight. The official hearing to reopen the asset division between me and Jared Grayson took place nearly 2 months after we began collecting evidence. This wasn't a quick procedural checkmark anymore. This was war where truth would be peeled back, layer by layer, like a long festered wound exposed to daylight. I sat on the plaintiff's side. Rachel was beside me, her face calm, like a chess master preparing the final moves. Across from us, Jared sat tapping his fingers against the table, his face stripped of the confidence he wore like armor during the first trial. And this time, Alyssa wasn't by his side. Rachel opened with surgical precision flow charts, Marcus's financial breakdowns, real estate documents for properties under Orion Ventures, traced transactions looping back to Alyssa's account. And then the first bomb, an internal email from Jared to a real estate agent instructing them to use an LLC under an external name to avoid divorce audits. He never saw that one coming. He didn't know I had a copy given to me by a former employee of his firm who'd read my Medium article and reached out anonymously, offering everything. As Rachel placed the printed email on the evidence table, Jared shot up. I object that evidence was obtained illegally. The judge lifted his glasses, unbothered. It was submitted with a signed witness affidavit and verified digital seal. Objection overruled. I looked at Jared, and for the first time, I didn't see the man who once dictated my entire life. I saw a cornered animal, gasping in a room where the air was running out.
Then Rachel called her surprise witness, Alyssa Raines. The courtroom stilled. Jared turned to the woman who had once starred beside him. That tick-tock sunset dance, his eyes wide. Alyssa walked in wearing a navy blue suit. No bold makeup, no flirtatious smile. She looked straight ahead, head high, and under Jared's stunned gaze declared, "He promised me I'd be part of clean investments and that it wouldn't affect the divorce. But I realized everything was in my name to dodge legal oversight. I was used." She handed Rachel a folder, a formal agreement between her and Jared, outlining how A.R. properties would serve as a pass-through to relocate marital assets post-divorce. Her testimony landed like the final blade, clean, merciless, and straight into the face Jared had managed to wear for so long. Rachel didn't need to say much in closing. "Your Honor," she said, voice low and steady, "my client, Hannah Grayson, is not here seeking retribution. She seeks transparency. Justice is not about vengeance. It's about ensuring those who believe themselves above the law are held accountable by it." Silence filled the room. The judge took nearly an hour to review everything. I sat still. Eyes on Jared. He never looked back at me. He stared at the floor the first time he couldn't control the narrative. Then the decision was read. The court grants the appeal. All assets connected to Orion Ventures, A.R. properties, and undeclared post-divorce transactions will be redistributed per state financial fraud statutes. Hannah Grayson is awarded full ownership of the Mint Hill property, custodial rights to the originally registered pet, and financial compensation totaling $734,000. I closed my eyes, took one deep breath. Not joy, relief. But it wasn't over. The judge continued. As for Mr. Jared Grayson, this court is forwarding relevant documentation to the North Carolina Department of Revenue for potential tax fraud and asset concealment review. Investigation to begin immediately. a knockout. Clean, legal, devastating. By late afternoon, the news had spread. A journalist from the Charlotte Observer, who'd been following my blog, ran a headline: CFO turns the tables marriage, fraud, and the reckoning of an abandoned wife. Twitter exploded with Grayson Gate. A young attorney tweeted, "At last, a woman uses Excel to dismantle a man. I didn't speak to the press. No need." The story told itself. That evening, I returned home, and Rufus returned to me per court order was lying by the window, his chin resting on the sill. When he heard the keys turn, he leapt up, whining softly the way he used to every night I came home. I dropped my bag, knelt to the floor, and wrapped my arms around him, my hands around his neck, tears falling into the fur that had grown a little grayer. "We're home now, baby," I whispered. This time, it's a real home. 3 months after the verdict, I returned to the house in Mint Hill, not to live in it, but to sign the transfer papers. I'd won. I had every right to reclaim that house, the place that once felt like home, where I imagined growing old with Jared and Rufus. But standing in front of that white wooden gate, I realized something: I didn't need it anymore. After signing, I handed the keys to a young couple, new parents, still trembling with nerves as they took them from my hand. I smiled. "Take care of the lavender by the porch," I said. "It loves the morning sun." Then I walked away, and I didn't look back. A month later, Hart and Haven Financial Advisory officially opened its doors, a firm I founded to support women after divorce. Our first office sat on the third floor of a red brick building in South End. No flashy signage, no marble conference rooms, just an open, sunlit space where women who'd been left behind could come, sit down, and begin reclaiming their lives, armed with spreadsheets, strategy, and unflinching clarity. I hired 3 women, a freshly minted attorney, a single mom who'd been laid off after her divorce, and a college student who had been tricked into co-signing debt by her ex-boyfriend. We didn't talk about healing, we talked about taking action. One Monday morning, I arrived early. As I stepped into the office, I spotted Scout, my rescue dog, curled up, his head resting against the desk leg. He wasn't Rufus, but like me, he had survived abandonment. Every morning as I brewed coffee, he'd nudge my ankle gently as if to say, "I see you, and I'm still here." On the wall, I taped up a quote from my very first blog post: "They can take everything, but they can't take the person I chose to become after it all." News of Jared continued to ripple across the internet. After the fraud investigation, his real estate license was revoked. A handful of former clients filed lawsuits. His LinkedIn profile vanished. Alyssa scrubbed her social media. Some said he moved to Nashville to sell cars. Others claimed he was trying to raise funds for a real estate app. No one bit. I didn't care. Not because I'd forgiven him, but because I was too busy living a life that no longer revolved around him. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter, something rare these days. It was from Maya, a woman in Raleigh. She wrote, "Dear Hannah, I found you through your blog. I silently endured a divorce where my husband took everything. After reading your story, I decided to reopen my case. And I won. Not just the assets, but myself." I folded the letter and placed it on my desk, gazing out the window. The Charlotte sun was setting slow, casting warm orange light across the rooftops and the early turning trees. I used to imagine my victory would be some explosive act of revenge. Fire, fury,
Jared kneeling in humiliation. But it turns out real victory is waking up and not thinking about him at all. It's looking in the mirror and seeing a woman who never broke even when life bent her to the edge. That evening, I sat down at my desk. Scout curled at my feet. I opened my inbox and began replying to the flood of messages seeking help. A woman in Texas whose cheating husband was fighting for custody. A mother in Colorado, unsure whether her husband's financial contract was fair. I didn't just answer, I sent templates, legal links, free learning resources. I didn't do it for money. I did it because I had once been them. Before turning off the lights, I reopened a Word file I'd never shared. The title read, "An Empire Built from Ruins." I typed the final line: if a woman who was left post-surgery lost her home, her dog, her dignity can rise, strap on heels, start a company, and become a legal nightmare for the man who betrayed her, then maybe, just maybe, anything is possible. I hit save, stood up, switched off the lights. The room dimmed soft, not cold, not scary anymore. I stepped out, locked the door, laptop and new case files in my bag. Behind me, Scout's nails clicked gently against the floor. And ahead of me was my life, brand new.